Nico Enchavarria, he's won a couple of times on the PGA Tour now, and recently has won the ZOZO Championship in Japan. So let's break down his swing and what he does so well that's allowed him to win on the PGA Tour. So if we look from face on, you'll see it set up. He's got a little bit of tilt in that spine angle, especially for a fairway, which allows him to sweep it off the deck. A little bit of angle in those feet just to promote some good hip turn. And then if we look from down the line, very neutral posture, pretty neutral spine, just a little bit of bend forward with the head to maintain those natural spine curvatures, and then a little bit of knee bend, just very, very subtly, sort of the traditional posture that we'd see. A lot you can learn from keeping that posture very neutral. So let's have a look at him through the swing. You'll also notice his left arm grip is quite weak there. Not like slicer weak, but a little bit weak to what we see in some players. So let's just bring him to that takeaway position. You'll notice a lot of guys have this little right knee kick in and that left knee working back. So I'd describe his backswing as very sort of athletic and very traditional, and his downswing gets a little bit funky, but you'll see this is what you see time and time again with great players, is though that club head's just outside the hands, that shaft is pretty much always just outside the target line. You don't normally see guys wandering it back inside. There is exceptions to the rule, but you'll see a lot of guys in this position where the hands just kind of work back in a straight line. There you go. And that club shaft just outside the hands. The arm is staying nicely in front of the seam line on the polo shirt. Just very, very traditional sort of one-piece takeaway. If we look from down, face on, sorry. Let's bring him there. You'll see he's got a little bit of lateral movement to the right-hand side, probably more than you'd see in a lot of players. You'll see how he tilts the head slightly back there, just to create a little bit of momentum, a little bit of a lateral motion there. You'd see a lot of guys that hip working back a little bit earlier, and because of that, you won't see a huge amount of rotation in that hip, just because he is a little bit more lateral to that right side. You can see nice bit of width there. Arms are pretty much straight, a little bit of bend, but very, very sort of traditional there. A little bit more lateral, as you can see how he really bumps into that trail hip in backswing. So if we bring him up to halfway back, what you see with guys who have this little lateral bump, a la Justin Thomas as well, is that you don't see a tremendous amount of thorax or hip turn. Don't get me wrong, there's loads compared to your average amateur, but you'd see somebody more like Rory really rotating back here. You can see, let me just put that, you can see how much he does bump into that right hand side, and then as he gets sort of halfway back, that right hip starts to work back. So he's got that little bump, and then you can see how that right hip starts to work back here and then sets the club here. So what you can take on from this is the hands are nice and neutral in the middle of his chest there. You can see how he's got a little bit of hip tilt, some shoulder tilt there, and then let's bring him up to the top. Lovely, nice amount of width there. We bring him up to this static just before he starts the transition. You can see how much tilt he's got. He must be quite a tall guy. Quite a lot of hip tilt there. That left knee's worked in front towards the ball. You can see from this face-on view, got that little bit of lateral motion. Look how he's got that spine just tilted away from the target here. So a lot of guys I'll see will have this reverse spine angle, but you can see how sort of neutral he is at the top. Got this illusion of not a lot of thorax turn to a lot of guys. Like I say, the modern swing, you'd see more of that right shoulder at the top, but you can see there he creates a tremendous amount of width with those hands. You can see how little that right arm is actually bent. Now in terms of down the line, it's probably a little bit more out than some guys like an Adam Scott, where that right elbow is a little bit more tucked, but you will notice he's got quite a lot of tilt there in the spine. So let's talk a little bit now about transition. You see a lot of great players. So I'm counting that as top of the backswing, and this is transition, because what you're going to see here is how quickly this motion occurs. So look at that boom. So you can see, look how much that head starts to drop in such a short period, and you can see how athletic that motion is. So what he's really doing is really loading through the ground here, and you'll really see it on this angle of watch from the top. So he starts the downswing here. Like, look how much he loses height from the head and how much he's compressing. That's a lot considering what you see on tour. You can really see from the top how much he's working through the ground, and look at that difference in angle. Like I say, reminds me a lot of the Chilean Jaco Neiman. You can see, just look at that, boom, just lowers that chest into the ground there. It's creating a tremendous amount of speed. I don't know what his clubhead speed is, but I'm guessing it's quite a lot, and you can really see it here. Look how much lag he's got there. Look how the belt buckle's pointing at the ball. Chest is still back here. Look how he's regained, well, increase that knee angle, and like I say, he's really getting this sort of posture. Whereas if you look at the top, look how much that has changed. It's a huge amount. So if we bring him down, I love that position. The hands are nicely in front of the chest there. I'm assuming he plays a lot of fades or maybe pull draws, but really nice position there, getting the hands in front of the chest. Really love that position. And then let's bring him down. You can see how he's maintained that lag there. And you do that a lot of the times by maintaining that elbow position in the right arm. You'll see how much higher that club head is than the hands. Creates a tremendous amount of speed. And you can see from down the line how that shaft's pretty much on that right forearm there, nice and shallow. Let's bring him down. We miss a couple of frames here, but you can really see how he starts to work that shaft back onto the ball here. Lovely position. Let's bring him on face on. Look how much he's maintaining that lag. That's a better position for camera. Oh, beautiful. We got a nice impact frame there. So what you can see is how that right knee's worked towards the left. Look how much that shaft is ahead of the ball, or the hands are ahead of the ball. Nice bit of tilt there through that spine just to keep him nice and shallow. And then let's bring him through a few more frames. You'll see how a lot of the weight's gone into the toe here because of that movement like we talked about in the downswing with the spine. So he's really pressing through the ground and then lift off. So he's pushed through that toe, and then that pushes that left hip back. Then he extends the arms out. I don't love this position just from a spine angle perspective. It's a bit of a funky move that. Look how much he keeps his head down, and look how much the hands have released over. Usually you'll find guys with that much movement maybe have some issues around that right side of the spine, or sometimes that left shoulder or left elbow, because it is very much, if you look from here, very much a little flip there at the end. Now, I think a lot of that is due to this motion of how much he loses height here, and then kind of has to get so narrow in the finish, because if he was to go into more of a neutral position where that spine would be a little bit more upright, he would have more room for his arms to work. So for me, I'd like to see him a little bit taller through impact, and then not have as much of this little flippy sort of release, just from an injury perspective, because you can see how, I mean, you don't have to be a biomechanics expert to see that looks a little bit tight through that shoulder and through that spine here, but most of that is caused by this position here, because he just loses so much height and then has to flip it through, and then he sort of regains. This is exactly what I mean, because you can see how tight it is here, and then watch how his head moves up and he stands up through the shot and then regains that width. So a lot of it is just because he's lost so much height here. The arms have to go in almost like a T-Rex, just because they've got nowhere else to go. So it's a very unique swing in terms of the follow through. Like I say, very much that South American sort of vibe to it. So I like a lot of what he does. I'd like to see him create a little bit more height, but I'm sure he's going to win a lot of events on the PGA Tour. Looks very, very powerful player. He's already won a couple of times.